Hosted by Mary Howden, this week's interview is with Elaine Miller, pelvic health physiotherapist, comedian and women's health campaigner, whose magnificent Merkin moment in the Scottish Parliament made the headlines. Elaine answers audience questions related to health issues specific to the female body and discusses the important Let's Get Elected campaign, which seeks to support women standing as independent local election candidates.
Delighted to speak to Elaine Miller and have her here on our Zoom and to pick her brains about her, enormous wealth of knowledge in relation to women's health and, in particular, pelvic floors. Am I allowed to call you a Fanny Physio?
I would be offended if you didn't.
Elaine's also an award-winning comedian. And I've seen her show and she is absolutely fantastic. I'm sure there's lots of members that have as well. So we kind of miss your comedy, but I know that that's taken a bit of a back seat at the moment. And that also you've been involved in kind of trying to promote standing in elections, and I know that you stood yourself in Edinburgh. Was it the local council elections that you stood in?
Yeah, that's right.
So we've got lots of things to talk about with you today. So welcome, and it's really great to see you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very flattered.
So, what have you been up to recently in relation to your Get Dry by Christmas campaign, which we always look out for, I would have to say.
Well, good. I'm pleased because I'm a bit behind because I had COVID and I had a right dose of it. So I had said that I would do a video a week in the run up to 12 weeks before Christmas. I think I've done 3. So I'm going to get caught up on that next week and get them out. What I want to do is to build a hub of like reliable evidence-based information that's online that anybody can access, because if you've got a problem with your pelvic floor and you Google it, you just get porn. Like, it's really difficult to access information that you would want to look at and that is actually what healthcare professionals want you to see. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So I had started doing this fundraising thing because tech clearly isn't my thing, because I can't even move from one room to another and have a mute off. So that's what the dry. Oh no, that's not true. That's called Get a Grip, which is the same thing. It's just information, but not just do your pelvic floor exercises like what is a bladder? How does a bowel work? Why does constipation make you wet yourself more often? That sort of thing. And go through like birth injury and the impact of menopause and all this stuff that is basic information that women should have been given about their bodies so that you can know what normal is and when you need to seek help. But at the moment, there just isn't a vehicle for that for women pretty much anywhere in the world. Australia's ahead. Australia's got some good resources. They've got a thing called the Jean Hales Foundation, and it's like an online centre for women's health. It's all the things that are pertinent to do with having a female body you can access on Jean Hales. I'll send the link actually because it's a good thing to know. It's Hales, Hailes, and obviously it's set up for Australians, but the information is reliable. I really think we should have something like that in the UK. However, there isn't any funding for it because out of all of the money that is earmarked for research for public health, it's 2% of it gets awarded to female health issues. It's a bit of a scandal.
Pretty shocking, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and that has to cover everything. That's not just like reproductive organs, it's breastfeeding and anything to do with antenatal, postnatal, anything to do with menopause, anything to do with menstrual disorders, anything at all. It's might be 2.5%. Anyway, whatever it is, it's not enough. So I thought that's fine. I'll just set about trying to build something myself. And what I would like is that if it's a woman with an issue, she can find it on this website. But also if it's somebody that's like a sports coach or a Pilates instructor, that they can access proper information, because that's where women go. Like the sports coaches can pick up the youngsters that are wetting themselves and dropping out of exercise. And the Pilates instructors and yoga teachers, they're the ones that women with pelvic floor disorders are going to, because they don't know that Fanny Physios exist. Because we insist on calling ourselves pelvic floor physiotherapists instead of Fanny Physio. There's a number of my professional peers object to me using that phrase, but I think that it's very effective because it does exactly what it says in the tin.
Which, as far as women's health is concerned, that's exactly what you need. It's interesting you say that about yoga, because I used to go to yoga quite a lot, and I asked them to do a kind of session around pelvic floor, and it didn't feature in her repertoire of thinking about moves to do. So yeah, and it strikes me that lots of women don't really know very much about their bodies really, and how they work. And I'm of an age when it was all, what was that book, Our Bodies Ourselves, was
Yeah,
it
yeah,
called back in
yeah. Boston Women's Collective. Yeah,
and we were all supposed to get mirrors and have a look.
yeah. Which was that 1974 that book came out,
Yeah,
and
I
that
think
came
so.
from a bunch of women who said we are entitled to have reliable information about our bodies. We don't want to be ignorant about our own bodies, and there wasn't any resource for them, so they wrote this book themselves, and it was an absolute revelation. And they it must be because it was 50 years since it was printed, so they brought out a new edition, and guess what they added to Our
Oh,
Bodies Ourselves? That
man.
it's gone woke. Like there's a mention in it about, which actually I think is fair enough. Like some women who don't want to be women that are taking cross-sex hormones, they still need the same information, and they don't get accurate information. That's for sure. But I was surprised to see something that book was a watershed in feminism, and yeah, it's radically changed. I've got an
Well,
old copy,
sadly,
an original copy, a proper copy.
I believe I still have that original copy too, somewhere. I also have a women's health book as well from around about that time. But I mean, it's kind of, but you're right, the kind of knowledge around, and this drive to include men in our, as if they've got, anatomies that are like ours. It's just astonishing that it still continues at a pace. So. But you raise a really interesting point there, which is about young women taking cross-sex hormones and the impact for them. And I do think that, we are harming our young girls in lots of different ways, by
Yeah.
not dealing with the trauma that's causing them to want to not be women in the first place, or whatever other the underlying reason is. But the fact that, we're putting them on, they're being put on these dreadfully powerful concoction of drugs that we don't really know, do we? Do we know what the long-term impact is?
No, there's not been any research done on testosterone long term in a gender field, but there is lots and lots of data about what taking androgens does long term in the sports field. So the women who were competing with Sharon Davis, she's spoken very eloquently and repeatedly about the number of her competitors who have died prematurely that were Eastern Bloc athletes that were doped. And it was steroids that were given, which is a derivative of testosterone, like it is an androgen. So that cohort of women are really well studied, and we know it does harm. We know that being on these, it's slightly different drug, but it's the same family. The hormone it has the same impacts, so it increases your risk of cardiovascular disease. And a lot of these women had strokes prematurely. They had reproductive issues. They had a lot of baby loss and premature babies or infertility. And yeah, it's perfectly well understood. It's just not understood by the gender industry, because they would say that that's a different issue, and I don't think that it is. There's a growing number of clinicians and multidisciplinary clinicians globally that are saying, yeah, this isn't great. There was a paper out last year that was a big literature review of pelvic health in females that take cross-sex hormones, and 96% of them are left with a pelvic floor dysfunction within a few years. 96%. So they have really high rates of incontinence. And off the top of my head, I'm sure it's 84% of them are urinary incontinent, and they have sexual dysfunctions. And I think it's true because at the 199 Days protest in Edinburgh, I was there and I went over to go and speak to the people that disagree with us, like you do, right? You need to have conversation. And I was speaking to somebody who was willing to talk to me, which is unusual in itself. And I said to her, so I've done a literature review with a colleague into this, and we think we need to be setting up services for these women that are taking these hormones, because being incontinent in your 20s is horrendous. It's not good for you. It has a massive impact on your quality of life, and we need to work out a way to manage it. But because I am labelled as a hateful bigot, I can't get an in with this community to go and talk to them about it, because they're not going to speak to me because I'm one of the speakers. And I was trying to say to the people that were there, why don't you come over and listen? Because there's a big misunderstanding that you all think that we hate you, and that's not the case at all. It's my job to do something to improve your health and well-being. And I'm really up against it to try and get a way to communicate this with you. And it was interesting because I think I'm going to make an assumption that she recognised the symptoms, because she looked like she was taking testosterone herself. And then this small lady came over who was bedecked in like Palestinian flags, and she interrupted and said that the problem is that we're aggressive as a group. And she pointed to a flag that was one of, I think it's Posey Parker's, got the Union Jack and the suffragette colours. And she pointed at the flag and she said, see, things like that is just not helpful, flying flags. I said, but you're covered in flags, hen. And I said, so I don't understand why, like, this is relevant to Turf Island. They're making a political point at a political rally. I think it is okay for them to be flying a flag. You're talking about international affairs, which is not relevant to gender issues in any way. So what is it that I'm not understanding? And she blinked and she said, I hadn't thought about it like that. And I thought, no, you just haven't thought. And then a person who was male came over and he didn't want them speaking to me. He wanted to shut down the conversation completely. But I steered it back round, and the person that described herself as non-binary, she said that she thought that I was probably onto something that would be helpful, but suggested that I could speak to Stonewall to try and get an in with the community. So I thanked her for her suggestion, thinking, maybe I will. Maybe I will. They'd like that. I'll just message Ruth Hunt at the House of Lords. That'll go well.
How's your urinary incontinence, Ruth?
Aye, hers will be fine, because she's not daft enough to take this stuff, is she?
No, she's not, probably.
See, if you think about, like, Andrea Dworkin's essay, I think, is it in Right Wing Women, where she says that feminism's for all women, including the women you don't have anything in common with, including the women you don't like, the ones you don't speak to anymore. So that young woman that's been taking testosterone, she's one of ours. Like, these women are not interested in being our friends, but tough because they're female. So they are still subject to all of the pressures and losses, and nobody else is going to stand up for them if not us, because the focus is entirely on the males, who also have troubles with, the interventions. But they get the focus and the help as well. Such as it is. It's very poor, actually, in general.
Yeah. It's such a, I think I just, think it's awful that, that we actually have our government and our medical establishments actually, supporting that harm. It's awful. And these men that seem to control these young women are not going to know or understand anything what it's like for women's issues at all. So,
no,
but it's no surprise that there are men trying to control it.
I think a lot of it's profit as well, and just people are afraid to say no. I was speaking to a person that worked at Sandyford, who was one of the consultants a few years ago now at a menopause conference, and she was doing a talk on gynecology in gender studies in gender clinics. So I was excited because I assumed she'd be talking about the trans-identified females, but no, she was talking about the surgery and the men in a menopause conference. And I said to her, like, why is it tolerated that these youngsters are coming along and we know that we're doing them harm? We know that they're developing these problems that are hard enough to manage if you're in your 60s, never mind in your 20s. So what is it that we need to do when they turn up and they're already like deciding that this is what they need in order to have a happy life? And she said that most of the time they turn up in clinic and they're already on testosterone because they've been buying it over the counter, buying it on the black market. And she said once they're on it, it's really difficult to get them off. And I said, but that's our job. Like, you don't, like, harm minimization is a basic fundamental principle of people that are taking substances that they're abusing and it's not good for them. Like, what do you mean? It's just really difficult. Yeah, it is difficult. So let's find out a way to make it work. But she's no longer at that. She's no longer in the clinic. She's elsewhere now. They don't last long in the gender clinics. That's true. They've got a problem with staff retention for a reason.
Well, it's hardly surprising, is it? So back to your Dry by Christmas campaign.
Oh, yeah.
So how can we all be dry by Christmas?
So the evidence is that women with stress incontinence, so the one where you laugh and cough and sneeze and wet yourself a wee bit, if you do pelvic floor exercises 3 times a day for 3 months, 3/4 of women get dry. So the idea Dry by Christmas is I nag you on Twitter from the 24th of September to the 24th of December. And every time you see my wee avatar pop up, you do your pelvic floor exercises. And if it doesn't work, then you go and see your GP or you come into Fanny Physio clinic, because that means that it's either not just simple stress incontinence and that's why it's not worked, or you're not managing to do them properly. So it was just a way of trying to drive some publicity to it. But a colleague a woman that was doing her PhD, had a look at the data from this a couple of years ago and she published it because it works. And there's something unusual about, so most of the data that we've got is based from clinic, but women don't come to clinic until they're leaking or their pelvic pain or their sexual dysfunction is really interfering with their life. So there's a difference between what women that are in the community, women are very resourceful, right? So you just manage for a long time. It takes an average of about 7 years for a woman to come into pelvic health clinic. So I'm interested in that subset of women because it seems that it doesn't need an awful lot of education and nudging for them to self-diagnose and self-manage. So it's cheap to fix and it makes your orgasms better. Apparently, there's not gold standard evidence for that, but you could run your N of 1 study and see if doing your pelvic floor exercises improves your orgasms.
Oh well, there might be a reason to get them done then. So
Merry Christmas.
So so I'm just thinking, like, you've got a whole group of women here who are going to be asking questions soon at some point. So what are the basic exercises and can you do them with us so that we can do a mass clench-a-thon
That would be great. Because it's a feminist issue, right? You can't, I
It's a
said
feminist
one time,
issue.
you can't shout at the patriarchy if you piss yourself. So pelvic floor, I don't have my model here because I'm not at home. So if you imagine at the bottom of your pelvis, there's a little hammock of muscles that are holding everything up. And the action of the muscles is to squeeze and lift. That's all they do. So if you think about a time where you have had a really nasty fart brewing and you know that there's no way you're going to let that fart out, that's you doing a pelvic floor contraction. And if you pay attention to what you're feeling, because you are all doing it, that if you imagine that sensation of, oh my God, I can't let that out, what you feel is your bum hole squeezing, but it also lifts slightly. And you need both actions for the muscles to get a good muscle contraction. It's a squeeze and a lift, but it's only a wee bit. It's not a big movement. It's just a wee movement. So the reason I say fart, because I got into trouble with my professional peers for saying fart in Radio 4, but there's evidence that works because it's a command that's familiar. Everybody knows how to hold in a fart. So that's why we use it, or why I use it online, because it's easily understood and it's not something that you're going to muddle up with something else. About 30% of women push down, they bear down instead of pulling up. And it can take a bit of coaching to get them to do it properly, because if you're bearing down, it's not going to work. You have to pull up. So that's why I use holding a fart, which is vulgar but effective, a bit like myself. Um, so imagine you're going to hold in a fart, but do it on an exhale. So you take a deep breath in and then sigh out, and then squeeze and lift your bum hole, because you get a better contraction. When you take a breath, a lot of the time women will go and then they're doing their pelvic floor exercises. But when you do that, your diaphragm gets pushed. When you take a deep breath, your diaphragm gets pushed down and your pelvic floor is having to push against that. So it's much easier to do when you exhale. So if you take a deep breath in and then sigh out, and then you're going to squeeze and lift your bum hole for a count of 10. Shall we have a wee go, ladies?
I think so.
Right.
I think we absolutely should.
So deep breath in and then sigh out, and then you're going to squeeze and lift. Imagine you're holding in a fart for 10, 9, 8, 7. You've got to keep breathing at the same time, which is the tricky bit. 2, 1, and then relax. And you should feel something going, doo. And if you don't feel something let go, then either your muscles aren't strong enough to hold on for a count of 10. And 10 is important because at that point you get like a reduction of the urge to pee. So if you're in a queue, you can hang on for a bit longer. You can reduce the sense of, I have to start kicking all these other women out the queue because I'm going to disgrace myself. That's why it's a count of 10. So if you can't get there, sometimes women can do a decent contraction, but it just gradually pays off and they don't have the relaxation at the end. So that's usually just a strength issue. You just have to work to get the strength up, or you're just not sure what you're doing and you're not getting a good contraction. So practice it. Imagine you're holding in a fart for a count of 10, and that'll help you hang on, but it won't help you if you laugh or cough or sneeze. For that one, you need to go, oh, I'm going to fart. Oh, no, it's all right. It's gone away. And you do 10 contractions in a row at this sort of pace. So it's a really hard squeeze and then complete relaxation. Contract, relax. And I usually make a joke about if your eyebrows are going at the same time, we know that you're doing it. But I don't know, there isn't an anatomical link between your pelvic floor and your forehead, but everybody does it. I don't know why. It's like, pull it up. Does it? Perfectly valid. If it works for you, then that's great, sister. So a hold for a count of 3, 10 quick flicks in a row. And if you do that 3 times a day for 3 months, then 75% of women should be dry. We won't pee with the 10, 10, 3. There you go.
Oh, okay.
I'll summarize it and I'll send it to you so you can send it around to the network.
Right. Okay, that would be fantastic. I mean, I think actually that's been really helpful because I do think you kind of think you might be. I've been watching comments going up there, and there is a lot of people focusing on the wrong area. So,
Yeah. It's the bit like, if you think about a pair of knickers and there's the wee cotton bit in the gusset, that's the bit to think about. You're lifting yourself off of there. If you Google it, sometimes you'll get information about, imagine that you've got a compass or the dial of a clock and you're doing north, south, east, west and all of that sort of stuff. It doesn't, as a blunt tool, it doesn't really matter. You're looking to see if you can get a contraction, concentrating around your bum hole, because if it's working there, it's working everywhere. The muscles they all do the same thing and they're all supplied by the same nerve. So make it as simple as possible, give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, then come into clinic and we'll see what's going on.
right. Okay, that's really helpful. Well, that's got to be the quickest half hour I've ever had doing these Zooms, so that's great. What was I going to say? We were going to move on to talking about your Let's Get Elected campaign, but
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
wondering if we should take some questions first
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe come back, Vicky, if that's okay, maybe sort of 5-10 minutes before we're due to finish, and then we can move on to that.
Great.
Because I've been watching questions going up and down there, so probably there's quite a few for you around some
Magic.
of these issues.
Great. All right. I'll do some questions, then I'll come back to you at about 10 to, something like that, Mary. Okay.
Great.
So in no particular order. Somebody says, will you put the hate monster doing pelvic floor exercises back on X?
Oh,
And what
that's
is
a
the hate
great
monster? I
idea.
don't know what that is.
So Police Scotland had a campaign, an online campaign that was a cartoon that looked a bit like a bright red cookie monster, and they called it the Hate Monster. And it was very badly done. It was aimed at young men and like using language that, say, they said a racial slur, and before you know it, you've committed a hate crime. And this hate crime monster would like come out stage left and just lower over everybody. And it was roundly criticised for being shite, which is just shockingly bad. And because saying that, you know, what the Supreme Court has since clarified is that sex is biological. So at the time, before the hate crime legislation came in Scotland, saying that woman means adult human female would be a hate crime. If somebody was offended by it or offended on somebody else's behalf and reported it to the police. So the women are funny, right? So they just absorb symbols, and the hate crime monster became a symbol in Scotland very quickly of women means, you know, we're not taking your nonsense. And a woman called Bex, oh, I've forgotten her surname, she's Sewing with Steel on Twitter. She made a hate crime monster suit like overnight. And it was amazing. So the hate crime monster would turn up to the rallies and protests, and the women would turn up with knitted hats. And there was a couple of hate crime monster merkins appeared. They're just funny. So I've forgotten your question now. Sorry.
It was
About
about the hate monster doing the pelvic floor exercises.
Yes, that's right. I did do a video. I'll dig it out. I made a little cartoon thing with his eyebrows going up and down. Somebody's been paying attention to me. I'm flattered.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, no problem. I've written that down in a little bit of paper. I will put that out.
We've got a couple of urine-related questions. The first one is, I've noticed the gap between me thinking I need a wee to actually doing a wee has shrunk drastically since menopause. Is there anything I can do to reverse it?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, what we look for clinically is between first feeling the urge to pee and actually being bursting is 4 hours time. It's a long time. We'll let you get away with 2 hours, but if you find that you need to go for a pee and you need to go now, that's not normal. It's common at menopause because it's linked with loss of estrogen. So, with loss of estrogen, all of your genital tissues and your reproductive tissues are really thirsty for estrogen. So, the the first thing to look at is, do you have vaginal estrogen? You don't need to take HRT. HRT is not for everybody, although it's suiting me just fine. But you can take low dose vaginal estrogen. The standard dose is to take it every day for 3 months, and a vaginal pessary overnight twice a week for 3 months, and then you can titrate it down, and women can stay on it for the rest of their lives. And what that does is it stops loss of bulk of the genital tissues, because that can affect the way that your bladder is supported, and the actual width of your pee hole from your urethra can land up widening, and your bladder can get a bit twitchy. So that would be the first thing. In America, they're doing a big drive to try and get all women over the age of about 45 onto vaginal estrogen. Of all the symptoms of menopause, it's the only one that continues over time. So it just gets more and more marked. The longer you live, the more symptoms of vaginal atrophy you're going to have. There's other things that can cause it as well, though. If you've got an irritable bladder or an overactive bladder, then that can mean that you don't get a lot of warning. And some of those symptoms can respond really well to physio, so speak to your GP and they can refer you into clinic. And there's also some medication that is really good. They'll probably trial you in the cheaper one first, which the side effects aren't tolerated by lots and lots of people. It can give you a very dry mouth. But there's a medication called mirabegnon that's very good, that a lot of women land up on that, and it's super helpful. So yeah, if you find that you can't wait between like first feeling the urge to pee for 2 hours before you're bursting and have to go to the toilet, that's not normal. So don't put up with it.
Okay, and go and see your GP, get referred and so on.
Yeah, yeah. Just say that you've got it's overactive bladder or urgency that it's called, and you shouldn't be expected to put up with it because it's the one that's linked with falls in older women because they have to go to the toilet, they have to go now, and they're hurrying and they trip and fall. So it's a massive health problem. We should be getting women that are postmenopausal into vaginal estrogen.
Okay, brilliant. Somebody else has asked, why does it take longer to pee as you get older?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that either. Um, I'm going to guess that it's because the wall of your muscle, the wall of your bladder, the wall of your muscle is a bladder, the wall of your bladder is a muscle, and it must be something to do with that. Um, I don't know. I'm going to find that out.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Someone else has asked, in your experience, how common is incontinence as an issue for women who haven't given birth and who are younger and who technically shouldn't have those kind of issues?
Yeah, so it's hard to establish the real data because women lie. They're not honest about this stuff. We know that women will minimize the number of symptoms that they're having and the impact it's having on their life to the urologist because it's shameful, right? So the research says that somewhere between 4 and 20% of women aged 15 to 24 wet themselves. It's a big range of numbers because we don't really know the truth of it, but there are conditions. There's a thing called giggle incontinence where young girls from their giggling they have complete bladder loss, and it's not that uncommon. So those girls are the ones that will cross their legs and sit down when they're laughing because they're leaking and they stop exercising. And it's also linked with sexual dysfunctions. They tend to have an overactive pelvic floor that becomes painful in penetration. So it varies. So the rough guide is about 20% of women before menopause are leaking. Usually that's because they've got an overactive pelvic floor, they've got one that's not relaxing properly. Now, doing the pelvic floor exercises won't help that, but even having that information is useful in clinic. If it causes pain, we want you to stop doing it, but doing the pelvic floor exercises, we need to do the opposite for that if you've got an overactive pelvic floor. Once you're menopausal, then it's menopause is a great leveler. So it doesn't make any difference whether you've had children, how many children you've had, how you gave birth, compared to whether you were never pregnant in the first place. 50% of women over the age of 50 have got vaginal prolapse, and that's irrelevant about how many kids you've had. And it's just because estrogen is really important for your pelvic health. So about 1 in 5 women, but increasing with age.
Wow, that's really
Yeah, it's
interesting.
shocking, right?
It's
It's
shocking,
shocking.
yeah, shocking.
Yeah.
The next question is, do we have stats on, you talked about 2% being for women's specific issues.
Yeah.
What about male specific provisions? Do you know what percentage is given to
Yeah.
that?
I think it's 2.4%. I think I got that wrong.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know as a comparison. So that would be things like prostate cancer and erectile dysfunction. I do know that there's 8 different classes of medication available for prescription on the NHS to help a man who's got erectile dysfunction. And that's not medications, that's classes of types of medications. So there's lots of different varieties of them, which is a good thing. And there is one medication for female sexual dysfunction, which you can't get on the NHS because if you take it every day for a month, it will give you 1/4 of an extra orgasm. And if it doesn't work, if you've got body image problems, relationship problems, mood disorders, or something else that I've forgotten the name of, which is basically every middle-aged woman that it's aimed at helping. And if you drink alcohol when you take this drug, it will give you a stroke. So the NHS won't fund it, which is a good thing because it's shitty, shitty medicine. And so there just isn't anything for the female equivalent of Viagra.
Okay.
Mm. So I'll find out. I'll find out how much is directed to men's health. But there's
Great.
traditionally in medicine, there's always been much more focus on looking after men's reproductive health because, and I don't want to make a joke about it because if men's if they lose their erection, their ability to get an erection, it is really devastating for them. Like, it is a real problem for their mental health and their sense of self. And we know that, there's a serious self-harm as an issue in men under 50, and I suspect that there's a link. But scientists always research what they're interested in, and they're interested in willies and not women's orgasms. So there we go. I'll find out if I'll find the percentage equivalent.
Great, thank you. The next question is something completely different. Can you tell us about how you got into doing comedy and what it was like when you were doing it for the first time?
That's a good question. Yeah, I did it by accident. So there was some women at the school gate were talking about like a bucket list thing, but for turning 40. And they were going to do really impressive things. Like, one of them was going to run a marathon, and one of them was going to go back to uni. And I said I would do stand up because I'd been at a party in my 20s telling a story about a date that I'd had the night before that, it wasn't a criminal date, but it was desperate. It was just funny. And this guy that was there said, it was about 1996, it was a long time ago. And he said, did I want 5 minutes at the Comedy Store? Because at the time you could get 5 minutes at the Comedy Store. And of course I said, don't be ridiculous, like that would be embarrassing. But because he said that, I had this understanding that, yeah, I could do stand up if I wanted to. So I said I would enter this competition, a newcomers competition, because I didn't know what I was doing. And newcomers competition means that you want an agent, like you're actually looking to turn it into a job. So I roll up with my wee jokes, and I got through to the semi-final and thoroughly enjoyed myself. So I was doing just like on the circuit, just doing straight stand up. And then a patient had told me a story about her wetting herself on the doorstep, but she was Glaswegian and hilarious. So I said to her, can I use that in a set? She knew I did stand up. And there was 4 women in the basement bar of the stand came up to me and said, yeah, me too. And they were just doing like women to women solidarity. They didn't know that it was my job. And I thought that's really interesting because I can't get women to talk to me in clinic as easily as I can in a basement bar. So I wrote a fringe show about pelvic floors because I'd had too much gin. And I thought, brilliant, I'll just do that. That'll totally work. But it did work. Like, weirdly, it did work. So I've done some research into using humour as a health promotion tool for embarrassing issues. It does work for some women. Some women do not approve of vernacular language, and the trick is to make the joke on the issue, on the condition, and not on the woman that's got the problem. But that's how I got into it. And I miss it because I got into trouble in the Fringe a couple of years ago because I wrote a show called Viva Your Vulva, The Whole Story, which was about how 50% of women in the UK aren't sure about which is their vulva and which is their vagina. So I built a vulva on stage, and it was one of the Glasgow TERFs that made the poster for me. It was on magnets, so I put each bit up and explained like what is a labia, what is it for, what is normal, what is not. And it got 5 stars, which is quite hard to get in the Fringe. 5 stars from the Scotsman, which is not easy. And I thought it was inclusive because I had included trans-identified females, but I didn't include trans-identified men. And that got me into some trouble. And then I compounded the problem because in an interview I said, well, I also don't include 17th century French architecture in the show because it doesn't have a vulva either. So why would I put the men in? And I got cancelled. So, oh well, never mind.
So have you any more plans for comedy?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it recently, actually, a bit because I do miss it. And I think it's for this stuff for women's health, it's a really useful approach because it's a good way of communicating. Like if it appeals to you, it works. So I've got a half-written show about knitting, which I was thinking I would do next year in the Fringe, but I don't. I think it's probably too early because I'm still cancelled. But in the back of this Tom Daly knitting show, which I have opinions about, don't you knit with acrylic and chunky knit, you big baby buyer man. Anyway, I thought I could do that show, which is like about like women's crafts and the disrespect that textiles get because it's women's crafts. It's sort of like turfy subtly, but it's about the history of knitting because I'm a big knitter. So I'll maybe do that. Actually I'm quite pleased with it. There's something that's funny, but I think the most useful thing is I was writing a pantomime called Leaking Beauty, because comedy's great, but it's a bit niche. It's a bit like poetry or opera or ballet. Like if you're into it, you're really into it, and if you're not, you're not. Everybody knows what a pantomime is, so it's the same idea as the stand-up shows, but it's an adult pantomime. So I keep thinking maybe I should go back and get that finished, because I'm
I'm
very
sure a lot
pleased
of us
with
would
it.
pay to come and see Leaking Beauty. Yeah.
It's funny, and it ends with, like a big clench along at the end, and the pelvic floor fairy comes on. She's got a magic wand, which is a brand of vibrator, right? So ha ha ha. It's very silly. It's very silly, but it's pantomime. But I keep thinking I'm missing it. I should try and get myself back. And because that would be research based, then maybe I'll get some funding for it. It's easier than through the arts network on its own if it's health based. Who knows? We'll see. I'll give it a shot.
Brilliant, brilliant. Another question is, do you have any reflections on your appearance at the Scottish Parliament?
Hashtag no regrets. Yeah, that's funny. You mean the time that I exercised my democratic right to object to their nonsense, protest, my democratic right to protest. Yeah, that's really interesting because it was a long time ago now, right? And the trans activists, man, they still bring it up on Twitter. It's really funny. Every now and then, like probably once a month now, I get somebody that puts a photo of it up and they go, "Is that you?" Like, well, obviously, like it's my face and my name, obviously. Which am I supposed to be ashamed? Yeah, that's I didn't foresee what would happen when I did it because I didn't know that the MSP was going to record it. It was Douglas Lumsden that picked up his phone and recorded it. And if he hadn't done that, it wouldn't have been as effective. It was because he recorded it and then somehow that made its way into the Daily Mail. But I think they call it evergreen content, like once something keeps coming up. So yeah, it was worth it.
I thinking about that, it was a long time ago, but thinking about your Merkin is how many people actually thought it was real.
I know. I mean, where I stay in Edinburgh, Alex Cole Hamilton's effectively a neighbour of mine, and I bumped into him the next morning because it was in the run up to Christmas, right? So I had to go and get all the Christmas shopping, and he came over and he went, "Oh my God, I thought it was real." It's like, Alex, I thought you were more familiar with women's bodies than that.
That probably needs to get edited out. What was going to say? So that actually leads us quite nicely into, because you do have political campaigning aspirations and a kind of view about us women standing more in political positions. So do you want to tell us about is it Let's Get Elected it's called?
Yeah, well done. Yeah, let's get elected on Twitter. It's dangerous women. Let's get elected. So after the GRR bill went through in my local council, there was a by-election, and I was taken out for dinner by some terrifying women who said that they thought I should stand because I was local, and the women under like they're all women that you'll know, so they're all experienced in politics, and I was just the talking monkey bit. And the reason that we did it was partly to get press and try and keep these issues in the newspapers and in people's consciousness, and also to try and get information about how you stand as an independent. Because normally in a political system, you stand as part of the party and you get all the support, and standing on your own, there's no assistance out there. There's absolutely no information. So we did it in order to figure out how it works. And me and Verdi Wilson put together this, well, it was Verdi that did it, this pack, Let's Get Elected. And in it, it explains it's Scottish based because we were focusing on Scotland. So it shows how the political system all jigsaws together. Because in Scotland, you've got 8 MSPs, and a lot of people don't know that. They know possibly that they've got one MSP, but they don't know that they've got all the list ones as well. So we explained all of that and explained what a hustings is and how to run it, and then how to stand on your own. And the idea was just to sort of raise like political literacy, because I thought I knew a bit about politics before I was in the by-election, and what a steep learning curve I had. Like, I would have been able to probably name 2 or 3 of the panel on question time. So I thought I was politically engaged, but geez, oh, it's a beast. So we have an election in Scotland in May coming up, and obviously the Scottish Government are not interested in women or paying their dues to women because they still owe for Women Scotland rather a lot of money and they won't meet with them. And it occurs to me that the only thing that we've got that these people actually want is a vote. So I'd be quite keen to see, what I'd like to see is that every constituency holds its own hustings that's organised by women, and you invite the candidates to come along and just answer questions of the local community. And if they choose not to come because they don't want to engage with women, then you empty chair them and get that into the press. And force them to talk to us, because we are 52% of the constituency that they're hoping to represent. And if they won't even come and speak to you, they can't even vote. And even better than that would be getting women to stand, because it was quite interesting how much press we got. Like, I'm a complete randomer. I know nothing about politics. I'm really quite out of my depth, but I can talk. Like, I can answer these questions. And I've noticed that the women have become not even activists, but just educated about how these issues impact on women's lives. There's not a single one of them couldn't get up and speak at hustings. So we were trying to think about how to get women to, that lovely quote, I've forgotten who said it. She was the woman that was involved in the Grey Panthers, Maggie. Anyway, it'll come to me in a minute. And she said, speak your mind, even if your voice shakes. It'll come to me in a minute about who it was that said that. I'll find it and put it in the notes. Because if we don't get up and speak, we're not going to get anywhere. And we do have the blessing of democracy, such as it's not working that well in our favour, but we can use it to our advantage. So get up and ask questions and consider getting up and standing. Because even if we had half a dozen women that were there as independent candidates, we can get a lot of press. So I'm mulling it over. I mean, the outcome, the reason for standing would normally be to get elected and become an MSP. And you're not going to win as an independent. You're not, like, it's very unlikely that you'll get enough votes to actually get voted in. But as a tool for driving the focus onto the issues that pertain to women, I think it's useful. The difficulty is where you stand, because if you've got a candidate that is aware of women and pro-women, then you can end up taking votes away from them and it all gets a bit complicated. But there's some women that do understand politics in a way that I don't, that we would be able to get good advice and see what we could do. So yeah, I'm sort of mulling it over. I'll have a chat with Verdi and see what we can pull together. But the pack is good. So if you're interested, just email into dangerouswomen@gmail.com and or is it Let's Get Elected? See, she'll be annoyed with me because I can never remember. I'll find the link and I'll give you the link.
Yeah, another plug as well is that you and I and Zoe Holloway did a podcast, which is on the Women's Rights Network, around getting elected, doing hustings. Well, I say I was in there. I didn't actually contribute very much to it at all, but it's a very good, to get some kind of practical tips as well from that. And that's already there, I think, somewhere on our channels. And that was before the last election. So
Zoe's a wealth of it. She's got so much experience and she's just diplomatic in a way that I'm not. I mean, can you imagine if I landed up in Holyrood? Dearie me. What's her name? Martine get into trouble for one eye roll. Like,
I know. The thing is, though, as well, is that with a lot of women leaving because of, abuse and having a difficult time of it and stuff, you don't, that doesn't fill you with confidence that at the next elections we're going to get any real strong women. A lot of the strong women in Scotland I'm talking about, because it's obviously our elections in May next year, there's going to be that many strong women that are actually standing. So It is important, I think, to at least, if nothing else, finding out who your candidates are and asking them
Yeah,
questions, getting them to commit to things.
yeah.
Before Jackie Bailey, who's the deputy leader of the Labour Party, I'm explaining that for people who don't know that in Scotland. I obviously know you know that, Elaine. But she said to me that the time to get candidates was just before they get elected because they're keen to sign up to things. But what you can do then is hold them to account afterwards if they sign up to, a particular women's
Oh,
issue or
yeah.
whatever, if they're not actually doing it. So if nothing else, I think we should take that and
Mm,
be holding their feet to account,
yeah,
really.
yeah. Yeah, she's an interesting one because she's changed her tune, and
Hmm.
fair play to her. Like, I think we need to try and embrace people that are changing their mind because we're going to see a lot of that over the
Yes.
next year or so, I hope. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I like the idea of rabble rousing, of course. I think that's much more where my natural skills lie. more more provocation than diplomacy, but
We need a mix, don't we? That's the thing, actually, is that we need rabble rousers, we need people with diplomacy, and we need women with diplomacy, and we need, women in the background supporting stuff.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's not a bad thing to have a mix of stuff. It's
No, the
just when that creates issues that it becomes problematic.
yeah,
So,
yeah. The
so
power of writing emails and FOIs and that sort of thing. I think that's how it's the long game that will win this.
mhm. And that's something that actually the Women's Rights Network members are really good at, is getting
Yeah.
all these FOIs done and stuff. So, don't underestimate the impact of some of that stuff, I think.
Hmm.
So, any last words of wisdom for us about either our pelvic health or our political ambitions
Well,
that you'd like to give us?
I have a request because I'm in Newport in Wales on the 20th of November for our physiotherapy conference. This paper that I said that I'd written with a colleague, we're presenting it at the conference, which means it will be up on stage in front of about 1,000 of my professional peers, some of whom would prefer if I wasn't there. And we present our paper on the harms that are done to females with cross-sex hormones and what we're going to do because we need to build a workforce to help these people. So it's Thursday the 20th, and I had emailed into the WRN and Mershid Kimru to see if MD's around for a pint because we'd quite like to go and meet some women locally when we're in town. So if you are around, go and message me because apparently it's only about 10 minutes on the train between Newport and Cardiff. So we'll come into Cardiff if MD's free. That would be great. And then we can talk shop because there's so much exciting stuff going on in Wales. Like every time I open Twitter, I'm like, those women are on fire. So as far as
So,
pelvic, sorry.
so I was just going to say, Jane there from Wales has just confirmed there will be a posse there for you.
Oh, great. That's brilliant. Good, good, good. We just want to come pick your brains. Um, And as far as pelvic floor stuff goes, like I am a bit of a one trick pony with this. Like women put up with symptoms that you know you don't need to put up with. You know it's an annoyance and you'll get around to doing something about it. Please don't go and speak to your GP because there is lots and lots of help available. And the if like wetting yourself and pooing yourself has more of an impact on your well-being than anything else. So it has more of an impact on your quality of life than asthma, diabetes, these sorts of common conditions. So please don't put up with it. And I'm always happy to talk. I was going to say talk pish, but that is literal. Talk pelvic floors. So don't be stuck. Try your pelvic floor exercises. If it doesn't work, come into clinic.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Elaine, for joining us and sharing your infinite knowledge and wisdom on all these things. That's been a real pleasure to talk to you and to laugh along with you and share some bad words as well.
Well, thank you for having
Thank you
me
very
because it's always
much.
thanks for everything that you do. Yeah, WRN's a
We
force
should
to be reckoned with.
We should, yes, but we should maybe get you along a bit more regularly to get us all, get our our
Yeah.
our health improved. Anyway, on that note, thanks so much, and
Thank
it's
you
been a
very
pleasure.
much.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Nice seeing you. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and tap the bell to make sure you don't miss new content. Sign up to our newsletter at www.womensrights.network, and if you're interested in becoming a member, click on the Join Us link.